Welcome to the lecture titled Managing Stress Towards Employees' Subjective Well-Being, Organizational Level Interventions. As a part of the lecture series, Psychology of Well-Being. Well, this is second in the sequence of two lectures that are devoted to understanding various kinds of stress management interventions for enhancing or fostering subjective well-being amongst the employees in the organizational settings. Let us look at the various aspects of such interventions at the organizational level that we'll be able to understand with the help of this lecture. Let's go through the outline of the lecture. Well, first of all, we will recapitulate the need to foster subjective well-being among the employees. Then we'll be covering, we'll also recapitulate stress, coping, and well-being, the interrelations amongst these various concepts. Then we'll look at stress management interventions, or SMIs, at the organizational level, various types of that. And then finally, the efficacy of such SMIs or interventions at the organizational level. We'll emphasize the need for more motivation and participation in SMI from the employees, and also the need to study the context and the process of SMI. Well, we have already understood what subjective well-being is in terms of the subjective evaluation of one's life, in terms of positive emotions, more positive emotions, lower levels of negative emotions or lower frequencies of negative emotions, and more satisfaction in life, affected by both internal and external factors including physical health, personality traits, etc. External factors including work life, access to material resources, relationships, etc., with the limitation that it generally takes care of good times or good positive aspects of external conditions that may be leading to subjective well-being. It might not touch various aspects of people's life, particularly living under trying circumstances, that what kind of struggles for well-being those employees or people in general might be going through. We have also seen that subjective well-being is an aspect of hedonic view of well-being that focuses on pleasure or happiness. We have also gone through earlier the concept of, or the theoretical framework that relates stress, coping, and well-being in terms of these important terms that are connected in a temporal sequence in general. And generally, we have the potential stressor or stimuli that may cause stress, known as stressor. Then these are cognitively appraised. We come to understand whether it is really a stressor that we need to guard against or not. And then such an appraisal leads us towards stress if it is really taken to be a genuine potential stressor. Once we experience stress, we try to address that through coping mechanisms that may focus on changing the environment or changing the emotions that we associate with that stressor that could be negative. So how to take care of those negative impact of stressors, negative emotions created by the stressor on us. And once that coping mechanism is effective, once we are able to address that stress experience, through various kinds of coping mechanisms, whether changing our own emotions or changing the environment, we could see that positive coping leads to a better sense of well-being. We have also seen that how various types of stress management interventions are linked with the stress coping well-being interrelationships, the framework that talks about that kind of relationship between stress coping and well-being. And we have seen that the primary intervention aims at the stressor, at the level of stressor itself, where we try to minimize the stressor in the environment, the number of stressors in the environment. That's known as um, primary intervention. At the level of appraisal, we find that we try to uh, engage in early detection and treatment. That's also known as secondary intervention. And it may focus on changing the appraisal itself. So it could be appraisal focused intervention. Then, at the level of having stress, we tend to respond through secondary intervention that may focus on the response itself, which is that of stressful experience. And we try to um, cope with that with the help of, at times, social support, who might be helpful in helping us understand the experiences and then move on towards more positive experiences. Then we find that one of the examples of such secondary intervention that may focus on the appraisal of the stressor itself within the organizational level intervention could be communication skills training that may help understand the situation, for example, the situation of conflicts, in a manner that we are able to take better steps to build a more conducive, more palatable, more solidarity based relationship within the organization. That possibility is there with the help of communication skills training. Well, there is another example of response focused intervention where we tend to not appraise the stressor, but we tend to change the experience by focusing on the experience of stress itself, which is the response to the stressor. And the example at the organizational level intervention could be the peer support group that may induce trust based interactions about the employee's problem. We have also seen that these are actually emotional regulation techniques as a part of coping or emotion focused coping, where we find that the examples of that could be response focused intervention or the appraisal focused intervention. In both ways, emotional regulation as the coping mechanism can be enhanced by the stress management interventions or SMI. In the previous lecture, we had seen SMI at the level of individual's own action. And in this lecture, we are going to see, or we have already started seeing with the help of examples of peer support group and conflict management, I beg your pardon, communication skills training that may help conflict management in a better manner as the examples of SMIs at the organizational level intervention. So, to summarize, then, stress management interventions or SMIs for employees at the organizational level may include, based on the review by Holman, Johnson, and O'Connor, and their review of such interventions is a very recent one, 2018. We also utilized the same resource for our previous lecture also, that focused on evidence-based studies of stress management interventions amongst the employees of various organizations. So we find that the basic nature of interventions, according to these authors, are reducing These are about reducing anxiety and depression and enhancing positive emotions or subjective well being of people, of the employees rather. Primary intervention that aims at reducing the sources of stress entails job redesign. We'll be going into the details of that very soon. The secondary intervention, which is about early detection and early treatment or intervention to reduce that feeling of stress or stressful experience with the help of peer support group and communication skills training. And then tertiary intervention would include rehabilitation for people facing chronic stress with the help of various activities or various types of rehabilitation, particularly by finding suitable or creating suitable environment within the organization or maybe outside the organizations also where the employee might have been working. We now focus on the primary intervention at the organizational level for stress management. And we find that the major primary intervention technique is job redesign, that is, restructuring types of work that is required or that are required in the organization towards fulfilling the organizational goals. Also, restructuring duration of work. How much time an employee may require to do a particular job. Is that too much for the employees in general to handle, or is it that we need to redesign or rework on the duration of work? Maybe we have to divide that overall work into various shifts, possibly. All such planning needs to be done at this primary intervention level. Then physical environment of the workplace, again, to what extent it is conducive for the people to work, whether it is comfortable in terms of various kinds of physical parameters like temperature, like humidity, also the kind of visual spaces which are available in the organization. Does it create a more comfortable site to look around and see that yes, this is something which is a likable kind of place in terms of its physical characteristics. So visual space, actual space of work in a comfortable manner, how much physical space one has for um, taking care of various activities in terms of one's movements, one's communication with other people, the um, feasibility feasibility for such kind of exercises. So all that includes physical environment of the workplace. Then social environment, again, very important as far as the comfort or discomfort or stress of the people goes. So nature of peer group that one has, whether it is more friendly or facilitative, or these could be about the hierarchies within the organization. So to what extent such hierarchies are problematic or stress inducing for the person, that has to be reworked on by the organization. To what extent these interventions, various types of interventions that are contained within job redesign are really effective, that we will see later in this particular lecture. Well, how about secondary intervention? That focuses on, as we mentioned earlier, early detection and early treatment or intervention to change the stressful experiences of people. Well, secondary intervention comprises two major techniques that are peer support group and communication skills training. Well, the peer support group, it helps cope with these stressful experiences of the employees by creating a non-judgmental and trust-based interactional space where one can open up, one can share difficulties or the difficult life experiences that one has gone through, and that might be meaningful in terms of handling these stressful experiences by actually creating the space for sharing that. And then also, once one shares that, it is quite possible that one is able to actually find better ways to handle those experiences with the help of support as well as actual feeling of not being alone in that entire stressful experience, and how one can try to tackle that particular difficulty or uh, discomfort that one has within the organizational setting. So, that is something which is possible with the help of the peer support group. Well, peer support group may sometimes act as both primary as well as secondary intervention. How? Because we have seen that in the primary intervention, we try to or we try to minimize the sources or the causes of stress itself. So we try to minimize the stressor. So, how does peer support group act as primary intervention? Well, it reduces hostile or discomforting social environment of the organization. So, if we have a good peer support group, it may reduce hostile and discomforting social environment and replaces that with a more conducive, uh, more meaningful peer support group. And why is it taken to be secondary intervention? Also, the peer support group, the availability of that, because it strengthens the process of coping with the stress in terms of, again, having a sense of solidarity, having a sense of being able to confide in someone that helps gather better strength in terms of feeling not being alone in that situation, and one can gather strength to understand the life condition or the stressful condition in a manner where one is able to move on despite difficulties, or it also helps to reduce the emotional disturbances or the difficulties of the person with the help of social support or the peer support group. Then communication skills training. Well, it is meaningful if the training is provided in a manner where it facilitates meaningful and clear exchanges of ideas or views with other employees. And eventually, it may help in managing difficult situations like conflicts that one may have with other employees, peers, or possibly with other levels of employees too. So, a meaningful and clear exchange of ideas may help in understanding the conflict situation better and also taking steps to resolve that particular conflict. Well, that is secondary intervention. We also have some other concerns related to successful implementation of intervention plans. So, mark these words, these are about implementing successfully the intervention plans. It's one thing to plan the interventions, as we have already seen, in terms of primary intervention at the organizational level. That involves job redesign. And at the secondary intervention at the organizational level, we have seen that how communication skills also may be useful besides the peer support group. But what are the factors, what are the processes that may help in making the implementation of these interventions successful? Well, these involve preparation, which is understanding what the resources are for the entire organization in terms of various stakeholders, in terms of various positive resources, people's skills that may be used towards various kinds of goals, including taking care of the welfare or the well being of the employees. Then screening, which means assessing the stress inducing aspects of the organization. Active planning involves steps to be taken to address the stressors, whether it is going to be primary, secondary, or tertiary intervention that has to be planned here. And then finally, applying the plans for change. So these steps are going to be very, very important when one wants the implementation of the intervention plans to produce results or to be successful. Another important consideration is employees' participation in the interventions. We have seen that implementation may involve preparation, screening, active planning, and implementation. But how about employees' participation in the intervention plans? That is something which has also been taken to be an important process to be included in the interventions. Well, it helps successful successful planning and often implementation through the fact that it may become more contextually relevant for the organization if it has inputs or if it is also guided by the views of the employees in the intervention plan. So what are the stressors, what are the ways in which the employees may want the intervention to be designed or redesigned to take care of the stress of the employees. So contextual relevance, the background of people, both personal, social, and organizational, the nature of work, where the organization is functioning, what are the various goals. So all these uh, important aspects of the organization is better known to the employees in general, whose stress has to be taken care of by the organization. So it makes sense to have their participation in the planning and implementation of the intervention. Then, if we have employees' participation, it leads to more commitment from them towards implementation because they have planned it. So it also brings in commitment from them. It also brings in a sense of ownership among the employees about the intervention. So this is something which needs to take place, which needs to be done because these are going to be the ones, the implementation plan that have been planned by us. So there is a greater sense of ownership when employees' participation is greater in the intervention, planning, and implementation. Well, but one also needs to be cautioned against some of the hurdles that may come up in having the employees' participation. The first one, competing ideas of employees and managers may come in. So different stakeholders, different employees, different levels of organizational hierarchies and different views have to come up. And the organization or the top level organizational management has to take care of such kind of conflicting ideas of the employees by possibly also reminding them about the organizational goals that every employee shares with the others. So that is the first one that one needs to be guarded against in terms of having employees participation. The second one, inappropriate hiring or firing practices needs to be observed. So again, one has to see that the selection as well as removal of the employees is logical in nature. It has to be justified. It has to be in line with the organizational goals. Otherwise, we are going to find that the planning for planning and intervention for enhancing well-being amongst the employees may not be addressed properly. So these may act as hindrances there. Finally, we move on to the efficacy of stress management interventions at the organizational level. We observe that the quantitative indicators in terms of effect size of the interventions, these show very weak effect of primary intervention at the organizational level. So job redesign in terms of quantitative indicators of effect size of these interventions in the experimental studies, these do not show very strong effect of job redesign. What does it mean? Does it mean that job redesign might not be a good idea in terms of SMI at the primary level? SMI as primary intervention at the organizational level. There are some positive indications from the qualitative study, the studies which are based not on the quantitative indicators or variables, but in terms of having the perceptions, views of the employees regarding what kind of causes of stress that are there in the organization and how to intervene in that. So if that is taken into account, the views and perceptions of the employees through the qualitative studies, these have shown that there can be a positive impact of job redesign, particularly in terms of a positive long-term effect of such primary interventions. So there are some positive indications for a successful or more successful intervention that have been indicated by the qualitative studies. Well, reviewers of these SMI studies or stress management intervention studies also recommend making the process of implementation more participatory, as we have discussed earlier, to by involving their participation, because studies have shown that more emotional exhaustion could be present among the employees if they view the intervention to be a burden. So that has some strong message towards why the employee's participation is very, very much important as far as understanding the as far as having a more successful intervention plan is concerned. So that is something that we could learn as far as the stress management interventions to foster or enhance well-being of the employees is concerned. And in this lecture, we focused on the organizational level interventions that range from job redesign to communication skills training and to also having peer support group. And besides that, we also could understand the importance of employees' participation in such kind of interventions, whether it is primary, secondary, or tertiary. Thank you very much.